My name is Janae Roscoe. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief of Government Relations and Public Policy for Operation Hope. Our founder, Chairman and CEO is John Hope Bryant, where he founded this company 30 years ago. We're a financial service NGO, America's leading financial inclusion nonprofit, and we are in the business of creating 1 million Black businesses through our One MBB initiative over the next 10 years, helping rebuild our Black businesses that were lost during COVID. And one of the things that is key and critical that has come up is the cryptocurrency space, the Bitcoin, the NFT. Some of our clients are utilizing it, and we applaud any kind of access to capital opportunities that our small businesses are a part of. We're also in the business of working to educate the consumer from the federal regulatory reform stage of what's happening, and then also encouraging consumers who are involved in this space to stay actively aware on how to protect their assets. Looking forward to the dialogue.
All right, thanks, Gina. Maybe Troy, you can go next.
All right, you can hear me? All right, good. My name is Troy Pelshak. I'm Senior Project Manager at Atlas Zen LLC, and we are a specialized project management firm that handles the projects between West Africa and North America, or just say engagement with West Africa to helping clients execute projects that are either on the continent, primarily Nigeria to be exact, if we want to say from a macro to a micro level, and we also within the region, external, going outside also. So we've ranged in a number of projects, ranging with going up in a lot of verticals, up and down. So my purpose for being here, I think I've been a big supporter of the Black blockchain and its impact it's been having. This is my fourth year, if I'm not mistaken. So I've seen the progress, I've seen the growth, and the space is just virgin territory.
All right, thanks, Troy. Julio Franco next.
Yeah, hi, my name is Frank Betts. I have over 25 years of business and technology leadership experience in corporate, university, and government sectors. Been involved with IT basically since the beginning of microcomputer, marketing, engineering, executive management positions with global corporations like 3M and also entrepreneurial ventures and startups like esports.com in the early days of Web2. I'm here because I have deep research interests in decentralized Web3 technology, unique physical and digital identification solutions. We utilize utility NFTs a lot, and I have an interest and I'm involved in protocol DAOs. Right? So I'm currently working on ventures based on my doctoral studies. I study the impact of blockchain traceability on trust and product authenticity. And these solutions include combining this unique digital identity with blockchain utility NFTs for proof of ownership and authenticity. I'm a co-founder and COO of AuthenticBay.com and the global head of technology for ZK Ladder. It's funny because when I was asked to participate in a panel at a Black Blockchain Summit, my first thought was, why Black blockchain when technology is supposed to be colorless? But when you start to think about it, the opportunities for minorities and women in crypto, you realize quickly that the barriers to entry for Web3 are still affected by the same educational disparities, lack of access to funding, especially from the standpoint of friends and family, bootstrapping, and obtaining loans, all the way up to the dismal record of the VC-backed Black ventures. So yeah, I'm here to add whatever I can add to this panel, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right, great. Thank you, Frank. And then finally, can you have Wright introduce themselves?
Sure. My name is, I'm Professor Del Wright. I am a full-time law professor at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and have been a law professor for about 12 or 13 years now. My focus primarily when I joined the academy was tax and entrepreneurship. But then when crypto happened, I got into crypto and that is now my full-time academic focus. I actually wrote a book, this book, Short and Happy Guide to Bitcoin, Blockchain, and Crypto, that, you know, you can find it on Amazon. And by the way, I'm not trying to pitch the book because, you know, I get $3. It doesn't really help. But the other thing I do, and I do this, I would say, in addition to my job, is I have a practice, and we have a crypto law practice where the business issues of crypto, particularly the business and tax issues of crypto, we represent a number of clients, and, you know, we probably have 30 clients now who have crypto ventures, and they still have the same business, entrepreneurship, and tax issues that other businesses have. And, you know, particularly on tax, which is my specialty, you know, and I used to work in tax division at DOJ. So, you know, I have a lot of background in helping businesses get structured properly and not just paying way too much money in taxes. And so that's the area of my specialty, is really just entrepreneurship, structuring, and tax efficiency. And so that's kind of how I got into the space, because most of the work I do with my clients and their platforms are, okay, you have a great idea. How do you turn that into an efficient business? How do you deal with payroll if you're paying in crypto? How do you deal with your capital gains issues? And how do you, you know, and setting up, one of the things about a lot of crypto companies, everybody wants to raise money, but raising money raises some very serious securities issues, and how to raise money without violating the securities laws, and whether that means, you know, using a Cayman Island company and a BVI sub, and why you need a Cayman Island company and a BVI sub. All those things are kind of within our areas of expertise. And so that's, I guess that's my addition to the panel, is, you know, these are real life businesses in the US, and they need an operating structure. And all too often I've found businesses who have a great idea, who don't get their kind of their back end legal done well, end up failing simply because they didn't do it right in the first place. And so, you know, that's kind of my area.
All right, great. Thanks for the intros, everyone. Yeah, so like the topic we have for today's session is Black communities in the crypto space, and basically how far we will go using Web3. And I think we have a pretty interesting panel today covering experience in entrepreneurship, project management, technology. And with that in mind, I think the first question I'd like to pose to you all is maybe just looking back to Web 2.0, like where we've come over the past years, decades, in terms of how Black people have been engaged in that space, where we missed out on, where we are able to capitalize, and how we can basically learn from our experiences with Web 2.0, moving to Web 3.0. Like, what are some of the things you think we can learn from there, and have that in mind as we're moving to 3.0? Right, so maybe Gina, we can start with you again.
Hey, I'm going to hit this from the from a numbers perspective, and how our community is really tapping into this industry. I had 2 poll questions on the Hoover. It hasn't shown up, so I'm just going to put it in the virtual around my presentation. And I've added some articles on Hoover that speak to this. The first thing I wanted to address, as we're talking about point 2 to point 3, is we reached the 100 million patent in the United States 30 years ago. We reached the 1100th patent in 3 years since then. It took 3 years to increase the amount that it took decades to get to that number. And a lot of that has to do with this space. It has to do with the fintech space. It has to do with what's happening in this environment, and how people are taking advantage of the metaverse and the webverse. And they're patenting, they're trademarking, they're copyrighting and protecting it. And a lot of people in the last 5 years that have been part of the Black Blockchain Summit are part of those numbers. And that's a great thing. The second part of the poll question that I put an article about was Oprah Winfrey's and Ava DuVernay's Queen Sugar Show. Now, I'm sure some of these fellas on here and definitely people in the audience are watching the season finale of Queen Sugar. But in the show, there is an active role about artists and how they're using NFTs and how the entrepreneurs are tapping into that universe in space. I don't know how that plot's going to play out, but Ava DuVernay has been active and acknowledged this space, and she has been talking about it. And quite frankly, a lot of Black entertainers, athletes are in this space. They have the assets to do it, by the way, so it makes it a little easier for them. But if you track where we've come from the beginning of this Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, NFT, stable coin space, just in the 5 years that the Blockchain Summit has occurred, there's a lot of positive entrepreneurship activity there. And that's good for our community that's always looking for new access to capital opportunities. And we just want to make sure, from a consumer and as well as an entrepreneur standpoint, that people are well-versed on all the activity and changes that are happening. I'm going to turn it over to the other gentleman to talk about the technical piece, but I wanted to have this conversation here in this space because we see a lot of our role models out there that are in this space. And it's important for us to educate people and the regular everyday grassroots consumer base about it, be cautious, but also just be engaging.
Yeah, all right. Troy, you want to go next?
Yes. Where have we gone in the last few years, and what opportunities have I seen as far as for the Black, brown, minority communities? Like rightfully said by Gina, there's been a lot of strides made. I mean, an immense, and I don't think there's not one sector that is not touched or hasn't been impacted or hasn't been, I guess, explored. We're talking from medical services to non-public information, to data transmission, to warehousing, to the traditional platforms that are already there that are just trying to put a layer on top to kind of say, how do we transition this? Now, the one thing I would say in all those strides and all those changes and all those innovative ideas that are coming out is the opportunity of the play. Where are we going? What is the opportunities for Black and brown communities? If we take a step back and we look at history, Web 1.0 to Web 2.0 to what we're migrating to or transitioning to the Web 3.0, content. All those web require content to expand, grow, build, and become ubiquitous in our everyday environment. I mean, now you're looking layers that are leaving the Internet of Things. So our devices now are as smart as our Web 1.0, Web 2.0. Where's the content behind all those things? The interfaces, I say the raw data that goes into making the picture picturesque. That's where the Black and brown community have. Own your data, own the content that's going to go into it. That's what blockchain provides you. The NFTs, the different space, the artists is what's alarming as far as some of the strides that artists are making as far as, saying, how you used to have watermark on your product, but there's ways you can kind of, over time, you get to circumvent that. What the NFTs now do for you in that space, along with a lot of other spaces. Now, what happens when you start layering NFT with other new technology, with other things? You start mixing it. It becomes a mix. Where does your content or your ownership of your own intellectual property gets lost or watered out? That's where I think a lot of Black communities can have a lot of buy-in and tie-in, irrespective of where they fall in this new wave technology. Because let's be honest, with the new age technology, there's the fear of this is so new, so big, so out of touch as far as what I can easily grasp that I'm just going to be too scared about it. So I think one of the biggest things is onboarding. You mentioned something about athletes being, I'm a former athlete myself, so professional athlete. So I've got hit in an unbelievable amount of projects and different stuff of selling your likeness and all these different things, monetizing your, former playing days and those things. And I'm wondering, in every one of those things that I've kind of just explored for my own educational purposes or just looking at seeing what's out there, I always looked at is the common athlete is not going to look at anything that's going to be hard to onboard. How do you onboard? There's never been an easy transition. And the same thing in blockchain 5 years ago. Onboarding was the biggest challenge in getting adoption. Once you circumvent that, it's the same thing that happens with NFTs, with DAO projects and anything else. How do you onboard? How easy is it or how difficult it is to onboard? And I think those are the two main things is owning your content and onboarding. I will yield some time back because I want to hear some of the other panelists speak.
Well, I don't know, are we on a group, we're gonna have a group discussion as well, or are we just gonna present individually? But, I agree with everything you just said. I mean, I think that, Web3 is creating a new business models and new opportunities for creators, right? And it doesn't matter if they're black or whatever color they are, but it gives us an ability to especially at the core of Web3, it's about communities, right? So if you can link to a community, then you can have access to this Web3 space, right? And one of the big things in the community that right now are these DAOs, right? These centralized autonomous organizations, right? And that what they do is they're a manifestation of these communities. So, it's a new way to finance projects, these DAOs. So, once you're involved in these DAOs, then you can, and then there's also governance involved in that, right? Where people can share value. And instead of being a top-down, like hierarchical structure, like the DAOs allow the Web3 technology to evolve, right? With incentives based on what the group thinks is important. And it's easy to understand why in the future as a creator is going to want to have DAOs, because a DAO is an excellent way for an artist to understand and communicate to their communities, right? And the artists can truly understand what the communities want in return. So, what I see, like some opportunities I see is for both artists and users, it's clearly monetary incentive and upside by joining a DAO, right? Because the small artists can finally make enough money to live comfortably, like high rates given to them from, listen to earn, like something like a listen to earn platform. So, artists can create communities around their music and interact with fans. And then, they can use these DAOs in the DAO structure, they can, interact with their fans. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, but I agree about the onboarding part, right? I mean, how do we, get access to some of this technology and understanding of what's available? But I think it's becoming easier and easier. I watch now some of these social media influencers, and they are building their communities now. And these communities will translate into the future and cross over easily into this, Web3 structure where they can start, earning their own money and having control and ownership over what they sell and what they do, more than these corporations at this point.
And, I'd just like to add, and I think everybody's on exactly the right track, but a lot of that, basically what we're talking about is Web3 allows disintermediation, meaning you don't need that group in between you and the people who want the information. And really Web 2 was about intermediation, and that's how Facebook made so much money. They were the intermediary standing between you and your friends. Now we have Web 3, which allows disintermediation. And two big examples of that, and I can tell one is a little proprietary, but I can talk about it. But there's a company called Ticket Fairy that says, we're going to sell tickets to an event, However, we're going to put this NFT with this ticket. And if you can get 7 or 10 people to come to the show, your ticket is free. And if you get these people to come, then you get this special access to certain things at the show. And so they're integrating Web3 into a Web2 space of simply buying tickets to an event. And think about the artists who are like, all right, I need people to get the word out. Well, before they would have to go out and hire a street team or hire someone else to do that. Now they can use NFTs as a way to incentivize people to do the work that they want directly to their audience, instead of having to go through some third party to do that. And the other thing is, if you just think about the YouTube Patreon model of how many influencers on YouTube say, hey, if you want the real access, go to my Patreon page. Well, that's a great opportunity for Web3 because you don't need the Patreon page. You can have the NFT that allows you access to the special information. And then Patreon is not standing in between the artist or the influencer and their audience taking a fee. And that's the beauty of Web3, is that allows that kind of disintermediation. And the DAO model is also a big part of that. And I've worked with probably a dozen companies setting up Wyoming DAO LLCs, because Wyoming is more or less leading the nation in making that a bit more efficient than other states. And how to use the DAO LLC, how to raise money in a DAO LLC that doesn't raise security laws concern. And those are really big parts of what's happening. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the growth, is once people really get it. And quite frankly, once Ethereum gets a little cheaper and a little bit easier to use, then you're going to see a huge advance in it.
Now, I got a question real quick though. How would you see about the onboarding if a layman that you're talking in, big city backstreet USA wants to actually take on that, without having to, how easy is the onboarding from the traditional knowledge, set up a Patreon page, set up your YouTube page, record content, upload, they've made it easy to onboard from that standpoint. How do you see that same transition where you're gaining more of your power back, but then you're losing the easy infrastructure that they've set up for you to be able to give them content that they can post up?
But you're absolutely right. That's the trade-off now. But this is where the opportunity lies, because if you think about, I don't know how many of you have been in, probably all of you have been involved in crypto for a while. You remember how hard it was to do certain things 3 or 4 years ago. Even something as simple as having a multi-sig wallet, because you didn't want that much risk sitting around on something that you can put in your pocket. And now it's so much easier to do those things. And people are building UIs to make it easier. And, we're just not there yet. And, I'm a big fan of Ethereum 2.0, because hopefully if they get this right, and I don't know if they're going to get it right or not, because I am not a tech person, but if they get this right and make it easier for everybody to be able to use Ethereum, I think we get the killer app. And what we need is the killer app, something that everybody can use. And, one last thing I'll add, the US government could be a big helper in this game in the event they introduce a central bank digital currency. Because I think if they do that and everybody's like, oh, the central bank digital currency is a lot like crypto, they will become a lot more familiar with control of their assets in a digital medium, which will make it a lot easier for things like that transition you're talking about for the artist. And I've dealt with artists, and the last thing they want to do is be talked to about how to use a UI to build for them. They're like, look, I do my art, that's what I do. All right. Yeah. But that's where the opportunity lies.
I think the US government would have a difficult stance in jumping that hurdle, because it's like picking a winner. Which platform is it going to be written on? They're going
to do their own. It's going to be the US government. They're not going to use USDC, and they're certainly not going to use Tether. They're going to introduce their own digital currency, which means that the government will now be able to track everything you spend, which will.
And that's a good thing. President Biden issued an executive order this spring. All of the financial federal regulatory agencies, from CFPB Federal Reserve, the OCC, Treasury, and FDIC, they're all engaged in this, and that's great for the consumer.
It is.
I think we only got minutes left.
Yeah.
Do you think they'll cannibalize their own
The time was gonna
currency?
fly, didn't we? We knew this time was gonna fly.
Right. So like I think maybe just taking an additional maybe 1 minute per speaker, like I'd like you to touch on I think when we began the session, Frank mentioned something about color not being an impact like on the web, but unfortunately we've seen that it's actually adds to in terms of how minorities can join. And I think Gina, you starting out, you kind of mentioned how maybe technology might have changed that. So maybe can we touch a bit on that? How basically communities are able to collaborate differently in Web 3.0 in relation to like minorities also being able to come online without as much resistance as we've seen on Web 2.0. Maybe just
Well,
1 minute
okay.
per speaker.
My final comments, because I think we got only 3 minutes left, so 1 minute per person here, or 4 minutes. I'll start off by saying again, Operation Hope's 1 million Black business initiative came on the back of 40% of Black businesses during COVID not surviving and needed to have reboots. And a lot of it had to do with them being brick and mortar companies and maybe just 1 or 2 people working for the company. And they did not have an active or vibrant space out there in the metaverse. They just didn't, and the Web 2.0. So over time, that problem and challenge turned into an opportunity where you now have institutions that may not were able to get funding to help revitalize their businesses. Now, we partner with Shopify and provide free resources through Operation Hope to help those businesses rebuild. But a lot of them start rethinking about access to capital. And a lot of them became a lot more educated and became consumers in this new space. And I think that's a good thing. So with the government trying its best to keep up with where the American spirit is in this space, we are part of the solution in helping people become educated about it and taking advantage about it for their individual businesses. And then, as someone said earlier, I think Frank, the communities that they serve and represent. Thank you for letting us be a part of this.
I think the space is just being scratched on. I mean, we're nowhere near where we could be, but we're going a lot further than where we've come from. And I think there's a lot of positive. I always say the one thing is own your data, own your own content as much as you can. Just keep that in mind. It's almost like so much stuff is innovative. So many things are happening at such a fast pace that the little small tool you drop and leave and you think is insignificant becomes that most valuable asset down the road, but you didn't put the right controls, measures, and signature per se on it to own your own data. So that's what I think is don't lose out in the transition on the things that you think are insignificant or you're not aware of. But I think there's a whole lot of opportunity in a lot of different spaces, and no matter what vertical, what profession, what industry, there is a segue into Web 3.0, metaverse, tokenization, the whole gambit. There is a way. Don't think it doesn't tap or doesn't affect or doesn't have something across your world. And then take it from there, take it from local to global. We're living in a global economy. We're living in a global world. What used to be far away across the ocean is now literally 2 seconds away, 2 minutes away at the click of a thumb. So keep that in mind and keep that in perspective. And I think those key main things will be the ones to help you transition and make that leap and not be left behind.
Yeah. All right, Frank.
Well, the way I see it is there's just a lot of opportunity right now. There are some barriers. We talked about some of the barriers initially and onboarding and these things like this, but if you want to get involved in Web3, first of all, we talk about Web3 like it is something that we can really put our arms around, but really it's about decentralization, right? I mean, I think if you have decentralization incorporated with your app or your web connection, then it's considered Web3. But just get involved, right? I mean, that's what I tell people. You know, if you want to, you know, join a DAO, and the reason I say DAO is because, you know, DAO is the heart of Web3, right? It is, like I said, it's about communities. And, you know, for Black folks, you know, and it's, you know, just get involved and you can start to understand, because in the DAO, you'll have people from all walks and all different experience levels that are in for a common purpose, right, in that community. And this is what the Web3 is bringing to us. And I see a lot of opportunity for, you know, people of color and minorities in general for, you know, to develop, you know, opportunities in the Web3 space because of this ability to bring them to come together and to use their power for, you know, they can monetize their power, and then they can also have access to resources, right? So, like I said, just, you know, get involved with the DAO and try to understand what's going on in the Web3 space as it develops, because as it develops, then there'll be more opportunities. And we talk about, like, when we look at the metaverse, in the metaverse, and I wasn't implying that, you know, color doesn't matter. I was saying just the opposite, actually, but in general, especially when it comes to onboarding. But when you look at, like, what happens in the metaverse, you know, you can be behind a, you know, an avatar. You'll have, you know, self-sovereign identity. You don't have to identify yourself necessarily from a racial or any perspective that you know, want to project to the world. So yeah, just get involved is what I say.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I echo everything said thus far, but, you know, keep in mind, this is me being the lawyer here, make sure you own your IP. Make sure that people cannot steal your work product. There have been millions of companies that have made money off the backs of Black creativity and wealth. And if, you know, just look at the N1 on Netscape, and I mean, yeah, Netflix, and figure out, like, wow, they made all that money off these guys who are doing all the work. And figure out, and, you know, I know people are like, I hate to talk to the lawyer because the lawyer is going to tell me and they're going to cost. I'm like, no, they're trying to protect you, right? Find a good lawyer, get them to watch your back. And if you are working with more than one person who is not physically attached to you at the hip, have an agreement in place. It doesn't even have to be a complicated agreement, but you need an agreement in place, because more businesses fail because the founders have a disagreement than any other cause. Right? So just have an agreement in place. It can be like, you make this decision, I make this is our deal, whatever, but have an agreement in place. This is me being the lawyer saying, look, I know you don't want to do this, but you have to do this to be successful. So please, please, please do that.